Hello, and welcome to a new episode from the Markets Middleman. Today, as usual, I'd like to share with you my plan moving forward into this week. And as I mentioned from last week, the closing of this week above this previous buy side, which was from November 2025, I think that price has already confirmed a break of structure. But it was just a matter of how deep the price would retrace lower before it continue pushing to the upside. So with this sideways price action right now, I'm still maintaining my bullish bias on the DXY, at least to take out this weekly high. So, as a point of interest, I think since price couldn't respect the daily breaker or this inverse weekly fair value gap or the daily structure, I think the next inefficiency that is very important is this obvious weekly fair value gap. And I think that there's a high chance that this week, the low of this week, will form around this weekly fair value gap. Maybe 25% of it, maybe 50% of it. But I do think that this is the most important inefficiency for price to balance and then continue its push to the upside, as I said, into this weekly high. And potentially we can see a break out of this range. So notice how long the DXY had been ranging inside of this consolidation or this range. It was ever since summer 2025. So really, of course, there's an internal trends within this range that are beautiful and they can offer like significant trades. But I do think that once we break out from this range, it's going to be aggressive. So I don't think the weekly high is just going to be the target. I think if price made a nice reaction from this weekly fair value gap, I think we're going to see a break of structure to the upside, and at least we could potentially balance this weekly fair value gap, which I spoke about um, in the last update. So let's move on to the daily time frame. From last week, I wanted this low before the news to sweep or balance this daily fair value gap. But instead, price took the first fair value gap where I said that I'll take a confirmation and then pushed higher. But this momentum couldn't last until Thursday. So on Thursday there was EU and GU interest rate, also the US interest rate. So last week was full of news and there was a lot of manipulation upside and downside. So this fair value gap was taken on Thursday, but I think due to the to this close below this daily and today how price pushed higher without sweeping this low, I thought that there's something not so aligning. So back into the 2 hour time frame, and what is the confirmation that I've taken for price to push higher from the first daily fair value gap? So this was the first daily fair value gap, and I couldn't make sure, or I couldn't trust that the DXY will go up unless until I saw this displacement on the 2 hour time frame and a bullish fair value gap. But even this potential push to the upside couldn't last, and in fact it broke into the downside and taken this low by a break of structure. So today at the market open, I wasn't either bearish nor bullish, because if I want to be bullish, this is not a proper structure to be bullish. There was no breaker that we swept. Price already broken the structure to the downside and closed below this breaker block over here. And the way just price behaved today, and it didn't took much for price to prove that yes, today is definitely a no trading day. So where does this leave us for the week ahead? I think, not I think, this is the weekly fair value gap I spoken about. Starts from this low, ends at this high over here. So all of this is untapped territory for the DXY. So I do think that we're gonna get some extra um, consolidation in a form of a downtrend, at least to sweep this or balance this weekly fair value gap, and I want to see a break of structure to the upside. Just the same thing I saw over here, same thing that was supposed to be here, that market created a high, displaced, fair value gap, and then a continuation. So even though you went bullish over here or bearish on the EU, you could have definitely went out with break even. So this is the area that I think DXY would react from, because this is the last recent breaker that the price formed. So I think there's going to be a little bit of manipulation to the upside, break of structure, etc. And in terms of the low of the week, I really cannot predict this. So I'm just gonna listen to price. Maybe today, Monday created a low. Tuesday might create another low, then Wednesday would come, sweep Monday and Tuesday low, and we could see the reversal occurring during Wednesday. So this is the plan, plain and simple. On the DXY, I think that the overall bullish structure is still highly intact. There's also this daily fair value gap, so at least the price could actually dip a little bit lower than the weekly to balance the daily fair value gap. So highly monitoring DXY at this area. So once I know the direction for the DXY, it makes it much more easier for me to spot the areas of interest and the bias on EU and GU moving forward. So, what about EU? Just a quick reminder in case you haven't watched the last forecast that I spoke about the first weekly break of structure that occurred on the weekly time frame on EU. And this was really significant because if you take this range, the same range occurring on DXY, we could have front run the potential upcoming move by anticipating the area of interest, which is the weekly daily fair value gap, and the fact that it closed above a previous buy side. Same thing can happen or can occur on the EU. Notice every time price goes into this consolidation for weeks, so this is actually on the weekly time frame, sorry, so this occurs for months. Okay, notice over here it consolidated for a long time, then trended. Again, consolidation, then trending. Right now, it had been consolidating for a long time, and I think that the break of structure that we want to see, we already saw a couple of weeks ago. So I think in the upcoming weeks, we're going to see EU testing the monthly fair value gap over here. So it's really a matter of time. But in terms of breaking the structure, this is the structure that EU had broken. So imagine that this was the range, okay? It's kind of ascending range. It clearly broke the structure to the downside by closing below this weekly breaker block. And why it's breaker? Because it's the last low price created before creating a new high. So this was the leg, and not only below the leg, it also closed below the sell side just to ensure that there's a lot of selling pressure occurring within those two candles over here that was formed after the war. So regardless of the war situation and whether it's going to be postponed or not, I think price had already taken its decision. So it might be like short-term affected, just like what happened today with this short-term spike to the upside. But I think for the long run, price had already decided the future outcome of this asset based on the weekly time frame. So it's obvious what I have on my charts, the weekly fair value gap, and it's really very important because this weekly fair value gap is coming after a sweep of a buy side, coming from a very important weekly fair value gap, and after a break of structure. So such weekly fair value gaps really stand out among areas of interest, especially coming within this context again. So I was really surprised that last week we couldn't take the weekly low, but that's significant because we still have this weekly low open for business. Okay, we haven't swept this weekly low and this sell side. So we haven't tested or we haven't reached a place where, okay, EU might actually be reversing from here. In fact, this is still open. The weekly low is still open. We have one of the two most important draw on liquidity for the EU. So this is why I'm gonna keeping high alerts on this weekly fair value gap. If I go onto the daily time frame, We said that last week we want the EU to sweep not only this fair value gap, but also this one. But we just had a market structure shift at this daily fair value gap, and I will just show you on the hourly time frame. I actually took a loss last week. I will show you on the charts. But on the daily time frame, before I move ahead, on the daily time frame, notice this daily fair value gap over here, as well as the weekly starts from this level. So this is the weekly fair value gap, and this is the daily fair value gap. This is really significant. I'm not sure what price could actually respect either the weekly. It can actually go down from here without testing the daily fair value gap, but I just need a confirmation for that because price can make a manipulation lower, but then still push higher until it mitigates or balance the daily fair value gap and then push lower. So I'm gonna be a little bit cautious over here. I need the confirmation from the weekly fair value gap, but however, on the daily fair value gap, I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of selling EU. So remember also the 12-hour breaker block, that was very important. It was actually very important throughout this time. I wanted price to, if you remember one of the forecasts, I wanted price actually to test this 12-hour breaker block over here. That was a very important level. It comes within the first 25% of the weekly fair value gap. So it comes between the weekly and the daily fair value gap. So what I'm expecting from price is the following. Either I want to see one of two things. Either the weekly fair value gap slash 12-hour breaker and then a break of structure to the downside, okay? Or I want to see the same thing but from the daily fair value gap. So I can start placing my selling position, okay, over the daily fair value gap since it will contain actually a lot of liquidity. So what's happening after this sell-off is very, very logical. And it actually means when the structure is like kind of consolidating like this and not a clear structure, it more likely means that this is just a correction. Okay? If this was a reversal pattern occurring and EU already swept like a major sell side or tapped into a major imbalance and right now it's reversing, we could have seen something like this. This is a clear reversal, like a V-shaped retest. We could have seen something like this, proper displacement. We could have seen something like this, that price already reached somewhere and created bullish fair value gaps and still displacing higher highs, higher lows. Okay, we could have seen something like this, price sweeping something, a major buy side and directly inverting an important daily fair value gap. In fact, here what did we saw? We saw just market rotating higher, then pushing down very aggressively, then again manipulating higher. Then even today, there was a lot of manipulation moving forward. So this looks actually more of a correction than of an impulsive to the upside. So moving forward for this week, the plan for this week is really simple. I'm gonna be avoiding longs simply because I'm gonna be trading against the overall trend, and I'm gonna be focused only on shorts unless I see something like maybe a retracement back into this 4-hour fair value gap, even though we swept last week's high, but I think this is the main draw on liquidity, which is the weekly fair value gap. If I see something like this, a clear retracement and then a clear market structure shift, then I would consider a very clean continuation into the upside. But what I want to be focused on first is the fact that EU could actually sweep or balance this level weekly slash daily fair value gap and then a break of structure to continue its push to the downside. And this time it could push really lower to sweep all of those sell sides, and maybe we could continue the push into this sell side and this monthly fair value gap. So maybe if you take an objective measurement from this whole wave and project it from the weekly fair value gap, it would give you something around the monthly fair value gap. You can set it on your chart. So this is going to be really interesting week to see how EU would actually react into this imbalance, which is really huge. So with that being said, I'm gonna share my perspective on GU and see what kind of levels there's over there. All right, so GU have the same exact structure like EU. Of course, they are different a little bit, but overall they move the same. So on GU, we also saw clearly how GU was able to sweep the high of last week, 2025. This was during January, and then we shifted our bias to bearish from the last forecast. We closed below this bullish weekly fair value gap, and we did inverted this weekly fair value gap. Now, I don't have the weekly bearish fair value gap just like as I had on the EU, but I have a clear break of structure and I have a clear couple of weekly highs. That one of them was taken today, but I think this weekly high should be taken as well. And this bearish or sorry bullish inverse fair value gap on the weekly could be triggered once again. So usually price would like to induce such weekly fair value gaps or inverse fair value gaps and then continue its push to the downside. The bias is still strongly bearish on GU because again, just like EU, it couldn't reach somewhere that I say, okay, this is a screaming bullish area of interest and price could rotate higher from here. No, in fact, it left this untaken. It left this small gap unfilled with this weekly low. So I think the next objective measurement for the GU is those two relative equal lows. There's other projection that we could even test those two relative equal lows, but it's still early to say from now. But I think the next draw on liquidity is clearly this weekly low plus those two relative equal lows over here. And then if we were able to continue our push to the downside, closing below this weekly breaker, then of course the next area for business would be those two relative equal lows. So on GU, I have this buy side. I have this gap to be fully filled, and then on the daily time frame, let's see on the daily what do we have. We have this previous inverse fair value gap. I annotated this in a previous forecast to show you how important this level was, but it did play out. Okay, so right now it left this daily buy side liquidity. Now here's the thing. For GU is crazy when it comes to volatility and to manipulation. So I really love this asset for how wild it can get. So I wouldn't be surprised, okay, if I see price just keep on going up, at some point balance this daily fair value gap. Okay, you have to watch out that yes, probably short term we could have broken the structure to the upside. But since overall it's still bearish, I think that any break of structure to the upside would be negated sharply after reaching such levels. And at the same time, there's no guarantees that GU could actually trade and especially close above this buy side because by this time DXY could have already reached the weekly fair value gap. So for GU, I don't have like this specific area of interest that okay, I'm sure that here's where gonna be my order, but I can simply monitor the DXY. Once DXY reached the weekly fair value gap, once EU reached the weekly fair value gap, I'm gonna see where GU is. Maybe GU is halfway through the weekly inverse fair value gap. I wouldn't demand a balance of this daily if this is the case. So I can start shorting GU maybe from this point over here, just 25% going into the inverse weekly fair value gap. So I really don't have anything. If you have any specific area on GU, please let me know. I'd be curious to know where's your area. But first and foremost is this buy side liquidity. Okay, and by this time I want to see maybe Tuesday or Monday would create a high. This is the high of Monday. Maybe Tuesday would create another high, and then Wednesday would sweep the high of Tuesday. Then yes, price already gave us liquidity to short from, and all of this could be occurring within the weekly fair value gap. So any break of structure would be valid until this last weekly low and probably even much lower into this sell side. Where do I start changing my view on DXY, and I would be convinced that okay, we are now switched to bearish. If I see within this week, and this is a 4-hour fair value gap that was created right now, but anyway, if I see that price is approaching this area of interest, failed to make a new structure and then displace lower, now failed again to make a new break of structure to the upside, then yes, here I would be rethinking about the bias, and I would think that okay, we already swept the buy side, this break of structure couldn't maintain, and we're just gonna keep on moving lower. But I think for the long run, DXY is still bullish. So as long as we're trading above this weekly fair value gap, especially on closing basis, I'm going to be really focusing on a reversal and a continuation to the upside. But if this actually fails, then only then I would change my bias and I would reconsider being bullish on DXY. So mark your levels, make sure you are safe always in terms of money management. Look today what happened, for example, on EU and GU, all of the USD pairs. This candle was formed within 1 minute. So really 1 minute can actually be very volatile. So that's why you should have avoided such low probability days. There's no clear structure. When I told you I wanted to be bullish, I've seen this sweep of sell side, maybe an extension to this 1 hour order block, but then I wanted to see a break of structure to the upside so I can join buyers at this breaker. But after we swept the buy side and the weekly high, and right now it's a little bit confusing for me where to enter. But as I mentioned, if I see a continuation, or sorry, a full displacement, maybe tomorrow, Tuesday, a better structure, maybe I can be bullish until the main area of interest. But until then, I prefer to be focusing just on going short after such thing. Last week's loss was actually over here. After this break of structure, price swept Tuesday high. Okay, tapped. All of this was happening within a daily fair value gap. I saw that the 1 hour closed clearly below this breaker, so I've set my sell limit order, my stop loss over this high, and I wanted to target either this sell side or this sell side. So I was swept with the stop loss clearly, but then price made the real displacement, retraced back into the breaker. This was during the news, so I waited the DXY to reach the 30 minutes fair value gap, but unfortunately this didn't happen, so I kind of backed off from price action within that day. But the next day I saw that there's still a very high potential for a reversal for a continuation lower from an 8-hour fair value gap. I will show you on the 8-hour time frame. This 8-hour fair value gap I was trying to short from, and in fact I did shorted the this level, but then on the lower time frame price just went aggressively against my position. So here was my short, it went in my favor, but then aggressively displacing higher, so I cutted my losses just after breaking above this structure on the downside. So last week was kind of tough, but this is the game, this is the name of the game, it's consistency. So if this breaker failed one time, it failed after working out like for a lot of times. Okay, so it's okay if a trade or a strategy gave you like 3 valid setups and then it failed for one, that's okay. And even though you entered this other setup, this is not a stop loss. In fact, okay, you could be targeting this low, but that's just 2R, or maybe you can protect your stop loss over here and target this low, so you already broke your 3R, and you could be targeting this, you entered over here and targeting this sell side, so this trade was break even, so you haven't lost anything but this trade. So I'm gonna be digging deeper into the trades of this quarter. This is the last week of quarter one, so there was a lot of lessons learned from specifically EU and GU ever since this great year started from this day. So we're gonna go through each and every potential trade based on how I work from SMC on higher time frames, and I'm sure it's gonna be great experience going back into the chart just from the beginning of the year, okay? No need to go back. We've spoken about the last year already, so we're just gonna make like a rundown of all of the obvious trades on EU so we can learn a lot of things and implement them hopefully for the next 3 months that are gonna come. So with that being said, thank you for making it that far. I'm curious to see your feedback and tell me whether you have any area of interest apart from what I've shared here. Really keep your plan plain and simple. If you take one trade this week, that would be just great. As long as you are sticking to your strategy, your rules, your discipline methods, and all of that. So, again, thank you if you made it, and I hope to see you in the next update. Let's go.